The bench strength of your team is critical to your overall performance and success, and ultimately the overall success of the business. Okay? And just as a point of reference, how many of you have actually been involved in a hiring decision? Some of you have worked with before, so that's good. So we've got a good mix of some of you who are experienced and those of you who are going to learn today. And for those of you who've been through the process, don't be surprised if I call on you. Sounds nice when the PowerPoint doesn't work for you. Okay. So today's workshop is going to be broken down into 2 modules, and you can look at it as pre-interview process and post-interview process. Okay, it's not working for us, so we'll just move ahead, okay? So essentially, you can think about this as the pre-interview process is you need to know what is it that you're going to be looking for. So we're going to talk about how do you develop a candidate profile. And then the second step is the actual interview. How do you conduct a successful interview, which will ensure you that you will be making your best hiring choice, okay? And if we have a little time, I will share with you the story of my best hire. So the pre-interview process, your interview prep. I'd like to draw on those of you who've done this before. What are some of the key things as you develop your candidate profile? You want to understand clearly what is it you're looking for. What are some of the things that you think are really important for us to pay attention to? So I'll start with you, Frank, since you and I sat together just a day ago. And I'll use the flip chart as we're going, so it would be helpful. Go ahead.
I really want somebody who can understand how to attain the goals and objectives of the organization. It's really important to me that they have that understanding of execution.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you, Frank, is you want a person that understands not just the job, but also the business, the framework in which they're working. Arlene, your thoughts? What else should we look for in an ideal candidate? How about can they do the job?
Skill set.
Ability. Skill set. I heard it. Yep. Ability. Okay. Anything else?
Energy.
Energy. Why energy?
Well, because you want to have somebody that's gonna bring the approach of being energetic and wanting to learn and take the task at hand of the job opportunity.
Good. And I like that you pointed out energy, and I want to take it a little step further. How about energy in terms of the fit on the team? So none of us kind of want, we want somebody who's compatible with our team. That's another critical factor that we need to consider when we're talking about what does this ideal candidate look like. Anything else that anybody thinks we haven't touched on?
Proven track record.
Exactly. So the basic things that you would look at in the job description, it'll normally say there's an experience level that we're looking for, skill sets, there's an educational criteria, and so forth. And the easiest way for you to approach this as a hiring manager is to use a frame of reference. And one of the best frames of reference is always look to the strongest performer on your team who's doing that particular role. That's kind of our starting point for building our profile. And then we look at, well, what do we need to achieve? So what is this person, what are some of the immediate expectations of this person? And long term, what would we be looking for this person to do? And another piece that I think is always critical is we need to look at our teams and assess what are we lacking on our teams. Because if we're going to go out and make an addition, let's make sure that we see it as a true opportunity. So we always look for what is the additional thing that we need to add to our team to, again, strengthen that bench strength. Okay. So from there, we move into our interview process. Before you go into an interview, I'm going to tell you, always have a plan. Like my PowerPoint presentation today, Murphy's Law will hit you, something will go wrong. But it's really important that you have an idea of how that interview is going to be structured. And has anybody had a particularly bad interview experience that they'd like to share? Okay, right.
No, I'm just kidding.
What about a particularly good interview experience?
Actually, I did, and it's when I came here. It was probably the most challenging interview I've ever been on in my life. They brought me down for a week.
I paid him, by the way, but, yes.
But it allowed me to really understand what the organization was about, and they actually got a good chance to take me apart too, so
Right.
it was good.
And that's one of the primary objectives of an interview. It's not only for us as an organization, as hiring managers, to assess candidates, but it's also a way for the candidates to assess us. So, I like to think of the interview process, it's in terms of developing your plan. There are a few things that need to be in play. So there's the logistics component, okay? Where are we going to have the interview? What's the format of the interview? Who's going to be involved? And then we get to the content of the interview, the actual format of the interview. And so when most people think of interview, they think of just the back and forth questioning. And that's important, and it's tied to that pre-interview work that we do where we're identifying the skills and the competencies, because that's how we will build our questions, because we want to make sure that we're gathering the information from the candidate that will allow us to best assess whether or not they're a fit. But the other piece is there are times when we want to ensure that it's not just a matter of us asking questions and hearing. There's sometimes a practical component, and that's where assessments come into play. One thing the question I always get about interview is, from hiring managers is, what is it that I cannot ask? I'm so afraid of, what if the candidate says something about age or just something inappropriate? And there are certain questions that are completely off limits, and just age, asking the candidate about their age, asking a female candidate whether or not you intend to get pregnant and be a stay-at-home mom. Some things which I think intuitively we probably know they should be off limits. But what could happen in an interview situation, and I always want you to be prepared for this, is that the candidate could voluntarily give you information that is too much information and is inappropriate information. And what I've seen this do a lot of times is completely throw an interview, because the interviewer just kind of freezes and says, well, how do I deal with this at this point? Thank you. When the lights go off in the interview, just make sure that you raise your hands. But back to what we're trying to gather out of the interview, because that's what we always need to focus on. And one of the things I always ask hiring managers to consider before they go into an interview is, what is your role? So as a hiring manager, what do you think would be some of the key aspects of your role? Francis, I'll start with you, because I know you've been through this before as well.
Well, to assess whether or not the skill set is there, whether I think that person is going to work well under stress, because it does happen, as well as under deadlines.
Okay.
And customer service is extremely important to me.
Okay.
So the customer service side has to be there, and just to be a person who respects other people regardless.
Okay, so your role, what I'm hearing from you then is your role is to assess this person's eligibility. And also I think it's important that we listen well in interviews, because in order to assess, we have to make sure that we're hearing those answers. And it's important in an interview that you ask and not tell. Okay, this is a key mistake that I think we all make. We know what we want, and we're so eager to give the information. Rob alluded to behavioral interviewing questioning earlier, and this is really one of the ideal formats within an interview setting. It's a way of assessing the candidate's experience. So instead of asking what I call the hypothetical question, what would you do in this situation? You ask the candidate, tell me about your particular experience. And this way you actually have some concrete examples. And that's what you're listening for. What are the concrete examples that the candidate's able to present you with? The other thing I think in terms of the role in the interview is you need to be a good observer. Because it's not just what you're hearing, it's the candidate's body language that will allow us to assess some of those softer skills. So things like the cultural fit and the fit on your team, that's, you know, that's part of that energy. That's something that you observe, okay? And then the other thing is, back to my earlier point about the interview not just being an opportunity for us to assess the candidate, but also an opportunity for the candidate to assess us. We have to sell. We have to brand ourselves as employers of choice. I could go on.
I'm aware, ma'am, and that's